Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the 2022 Democratic primary debate for Mayor of Providence, presented by News Talk 99.7 FM and AM 630 WPRO and the Bartholomew Town Podcast. Now, here's your moderator, Bill Bartholomew.
All right, welcome to the Bartholomew Town Podcast WPRO debate series. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Today we present a debate featuring the three candidates in the Democratic primary for Mayor of Providence: Brett Smiley, Nirva LaFortune, and Gonzalo Cuervo. As the candidates know, today's format will seek to provide equal and ample time for each candidate to expand on their answers and engage in a back and forth. The candidates have each agreed on a set of rules, and today's debate is scheduled to last one commercial-free hour. Let's begin with 60-second introductions, the order of which was generated randomly ahead of the start of today's forum, and we will begin with Gonzalo.
Good morning, Bill. I'm running for mayor of Providence for a very basic reason. Providence is a remarkable city with great institutions, talented people, and so much to offer. But there's really two realities in Providence that we're living. One is for upwardly mobile people that have the opportunity to take advantage of all these resources and to pay the increasingly high cost of living here. And there's another reality for thousands of families, working families and struggling individuals that are being priced out of their homes and are struggling to make ends meet in a city that is increasingly challenging for them. I think that the gap between those two realities is unsustainable, and it's something that is holding the entire city back, regardless of which category a person may fall into. There's opportunities for us to close that wealth gap, to create neighborhood-based opportunities, to lift more families out of poverty, and also to deliver the city services that people expect to receive. If we don't close that gap, we're not going to be able to deliver those services, and we're not going to be able to have a long-term sustainable city.
Thank you, Mr. Cuervo. Mr. Smiley?
Good morning, Bill, and thank you to WPRO for hosting this. My name is Brett Smiley, and I'm running for mayor because I love Providence. Like more and more people, I chose Providence, and I want to see Providence become the world-class city I think we all know it can become. I was proud to have served as Governor Raimondo's chief of staff, the state's director of administration through the worst days of the pandemic, and as the city's first chief operating officer. So I've had a front row seat to see what works, what doesn't work, and what needs to be changed. And because of that, I think Providence can be the best run city in the country. By getting back to the basics and focusing on what matters, quality of life issues in our neighborhoods, everything from better snow removal to finally fixing our streets and sidewalks. But being the best run city in the country also means having the best run school system in the country and restoring a sense of safety to our city. And by focusing on a real economic development plan that includes a plan for affordable housing. I've got the experience to get it done, and I'm confident that I can build a team in City Hall to make this a true world-class city.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Ms. LaFortune?
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, WPRO, for inviting us here. My name is Nirva LaFortune, and I'm running to be the mayor of Providence. I've been a city council person for the past 5 years. I grew up in the city of Providence. I'm a proud product of our public schools. I'm a parent of public school kids. And we need a mayor who not only has the professional experience, but also the lived experience to move our city forward. Providence is an amazing city. I've lived also many of the challenges that the city faces, and I've also seen it. We need the mayor that's going to be able to roll up their sleeves and get things done. We need a mayor who's going to prioritize education, ensure that every community is safe, ensure that government works for everyone. Our city's affordable. We're investing in environmental mitigation. We're making sure that we're delivering services. But more importantly, we need a mayor that's going to do the work. So I look forward to this conversation, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. We begin with a conversation on a fiscal note, if you will. Earlier this year, Providence voters approved a pension obligation bond, which would in essence seek to alleviate significant gaps in the city's pension fund relative to its liabilities, beginning with Mr. Smiley. As mayor, in concert with this bond, how would you seek to remedy or at least improve the city's fiscal challenges? 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, city leaders, the mayor proposed this pension obligation bond over a year ago and then went back and got to work and put some really important guardrails in place to make the proposal better, which is what the voters approved. One of those guardrails was the inclusion of a provision that if interest rates rose, we couldn't go forward with it. And that's the situation we find ourselves in right now. I do think that the pension obligation bond is a part of the solution, but we're going to have to wait a little bit for that because the interest rates have prevented us from moving forward. There's 5 years that this plan has been authorized for, and hopefully rates come back down. In the meantime, the city's going to have to continue to manage its budget in a fiscally responsible way and continue to make our obligations. I'm sympathetic to our city employees. They always did their part. Every 2 weeks when paychecks came out, their portion of their pension contribution was deducted from their paycheck. We're in this jam because mayors 30 years ago either skipped payments or made short payments, and the compounding effect of that is $1 billion in unfunded liability. And so it's important to me to continue to recognize that this is a failure of political leadership, not necessarily a failure of anything on behalf of our employees. And so I'm going to look for rates to come back down and continue to do the hard work of responsibly managing our city's budget until this tool becomes available to us once again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smiley. Ms. LaFortune, on the pension obligation bond and the city's fiscal challenges as a whole.
The pension obligation bond is a major challenge in the city of Providence. When I joined council in 2017, one of the first things that I worked on was the pension report with my former councilperson, Sam Zurier, who's now senator. And we outlined recommendations and a set of tools in how to address it. I'm proud to say that I engaged with the community and worked with the mayor to get the message out regarding the current pension obligation bond. But yes, we do need to wait until the interest rate is favorable, the market is favorable to the city of Providence. However, it's one of many tools in the toolbox. We also have to look at the city assets, do a full assessment of the budget to see where we're spending money and where we can save. We should also start talking about transitioning to the state pension system. And we have people who worked for the city for many years and they rely on these benefits. So we have to ensure that we're able to provide them with their benefits. But we do need to assess all the tools within the toolbox. And one of them should also mean making sure that we're able to grow our base, our economic base, but we need to fix our schools in order to do that. And that should be a top priority and part of the conversation as well.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cuervo.
The pension obligation bond was a tool that was devised to help with an influx of cash to close this gap that we have in our pension liability. The fact is that interest rates will probably not go down to the point where the safeguard will be lifted in the foreseeable future. So we have to think about other options. We need to continue to grow the city's tax base. The challenge with unfunded liability is not the dollar amount of this, amorphous amount. The challenge is that every year we're paying more and more and more, and that payment is growing at a rate that's higher than the city's tax base is growing, and the revenue is growing. So what we have to do is we need to responsibly manage the city's budget. We need to grow the city's tax base by making strategic investments in our local economy, in our businesses, and really creating opportunities for growth. And we also have to hold our nonprofits, institutional nonprofits, responsible in making sure that they're paying their fair share and not continuing to get millions of dollars in effective tax breaks.
All right, thank you. Very quickly, just going around here, is the projected required return on investment in the pension obligation bond a realistic number? Will we see a return of 8% or anything of that sort in the next 5 to 10 years? Just an opinion on this, beginning with Mr. Smiley.
Well, I think we're talking about the expected return in the pension fund,
correct,
not on the bond. So,
pardon me, on the fund itself.
That's right.
The bond.
I think it has become more realistic. The city has done the hard work because it costs money. It makes the payment go up every time they lower that rate of return down to 7% over the long run. I do think that is more realistic, certainly, than it used to be. And the city's in the pension business for decades, if not centuries. And so we're not looking at market fluctuations for any 3, 6, 9 month period. We're talking about over the long run.
Thank you. Ms. LaFortune, on that?
I do agree as well. The expected return on the pension fund, that is, that is a realistic number. I mean, the percentage might shift a bit, but that's definitely something that is realistic. But again, we do need to focus on addressing and stabilizing the pension system to ensure that we don't find ourselves in a position where we can't deliver basic city services, because right now the pension system is only about 23% funded. And to get us out of the critical state, we need to bring it to at least 60% funded. So we do need to do the work.
Mr. Cuervo, on that?
The 7% rate of return is a realistic number. It's been adjusted down multiple times. I believe that in the past it was at an unrealistic high amount. And as Brett mentioned, lowering the expected rate of return costs additional money. And what we need to do, as I said earlier, is to continue to grow the tax base, to hold our large institutional organizations, nonprofits accountable, and really manage our money well. The unfunded liability is a number that is perpetual. It includes every dollar that is owed to current employees, going back to people that have been retired for years. That number is a long-term number. That's not something that's going to be due tomorrow. It's like your mortgage. Nobody's calling you to say, hey, Bill, you owe $300,000 tomorrow. It's money that's owed over the long term. Now, we have to navigate that responsibility in a serious way, and we have to think about how we grow the city's tax base so that we're not crowding out city services with a ever-increasing pension payment.
All right, thank you all very much on that. Moving on to education. Providence schools were taken over by the state of Rhode Island ahead of the COVID-19 pandemic, a maneuver which has not produced any explicit improvements in outcomes. Commissioner Infante Green suggested that this takeover could last into this decade, deep into this decade. Beginning with Ms. LaFortune. Mm-hmm. Are you in favor of the state takeover of Providence schools? And as mayor, what action would you take to improve educational outcomes in Providence? Are you in favor of a partially elected school board? And what role should charter schools play in the total sum of educational institutions in Providence? I know there's a lot of questions there. You have 2 minutes to do that. Good luck.
Thank you. As the only parent and graduate and someone who holds a graduate degree in urban education policy, what we thought was that, like many families and many people in the city of Providence, this takeover was going to be a true partnership. That's what was delivered to us. I showed up to meetings. I participated. I provided input. I was there. But what we've seen is controversy after controversy. As mayor, I want to create a plan to responsibly return control back to the city of Providence. I think it's important for the stakeholders to be able to make decisions about our city schools, and also to set the conditions so that we're delivering a quality education and our students are learning in over 21st century buildings. That's why I worked on the first Fix Our School campaign to ensure that we pass the bond to fix our school buildings. I passed legislation to increase social and emotional support. Now, in terms of an elected school board, I do think a hybrid model makes the most sense. We had to vote on it recently, and I did vote in favor of upholding the mayor's veto. And the reason why is because we did not go through a open and transparent process, unfortunately. And I am tired, and many parents and families are tired of people making decisions about our schools without engaging with them and including their voice. And finally, what was the final question again?
Sorry. Yeah, charter schools on that.
Oh, the charter schools. Charter schools can be a great asset in terms of sharing ideas, but they're not the solution to our educational disparities. We need to invest in our neighborhood schools. My daughter goes to a neighborhood school. She goes to Nathan Bishop. I went to Nathaniel Green. My siblings went to Roger Williams. We need to invest in our neighborhood schools so every single child in every single neighborhood has access to a quality education. And as mayor, that will be a top priority. And we'll work with our stakeholders to create a plan. We stay on course because we've shifted on multiple occasions so that we can deliver a quality education to every single one of our families and children.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaFortune. Mr. Cuervo, on schools, are you in favor of the Providence school takeover? What action would you take to improve educational outcomes in Providence? Are you in favor of a partially elected school board? And what role should charters play in all this?
The state takeover came with great promise. And I think there's been a lot of disappointment. What we've seen is efforts to improve the situation, but the outcome has been added layers of bureaucracy to decision-making that stifle the hiring of teachers, that cause teachers to want to leave, that really challenge the opportunities that we thought would be made available by switching this up. I think I think the city needs to take back control of the school district. And what we need to do is we need to implement a model that creates more autonomy for our school-based administrators, a model that creates consistency in curriculums that switch at the drop of a dime, and that creates an environment where administrators and teachers are being moved around and there's no consistency in the education offered to our children. And also participation and accountability for our parents. One of the great things that charter schools point to is the level of engagement that they have with families and parents. We can accomplish that in the schools. And in terms of charter schools in general, they're an important tool in the toolbox. But the kids that get into charter schools get in through a lottery. And there are much more kids that don't win that lottery than those that do. So we cannot stop focusing on rebuilding and improving our community schools.
Thank you, Mr. Cuervo. Mr. Smiley, I'll repeat the questions because there are 4 questions in there. Are you in favor of the state takeover of Providence schools? As mayor, what actions would you take to improve educational outcomes in Providence? Are you in favor of a partially elected school board, and what role should charter schools play in all of this?
Great. Yeah. After 30 years of poor results in the Providence Public Schools, the state took this big step in instituting the takeover. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, we faced a global pandemic. Governor Raimondo left. We lost yet another superintendent at the time, and the takeover hasn't really taken off. And so I think now more than ever, there are some who would say that, well, this is the state's problem now. I think we need a mayor more than ever who's a champion for students and families and will fight to have a seat at the table even in the midst of the takeover and continue to advocate for our students and families and to hold the state accountable to make the changes that were promised. There is a detailed turnaround plan, and we're totally off track. And so that will be my priority as mayor. Additionally, there are things beyond state control that we can still do to improve student outcomes. I am strongly advocating for and have a plan for universal pre-K for all families in Providence. When I was serving as Governor Raimondo's chief of staff, we made state funding available. There's a partial state funding and partial city match for all cities and towns in Rhode Island to expand into high-quality pre-K. We know that this is an equity issue. Rich families have had pre-K for a long time and have been able to access it, whereas other families have been held back. It will also cut down the cost of childcare and I think improve student outcomes. I am a supporter of high-quality charters. I think that all charters aren't created equally, but the ones that are outperforming the traditional system should be allowed to persist. And I look at the waiting list of families trying to get into these charters as really the only data point that matters. Families want this option, and they do a good job. Finally, with respect to the school board, I don't support the proposal for a partially elected school board. I don't think injecting more politics into our school system will result in better education. I think we should be reforming the appointed school board so that we have designated spots for parents, for students, for people with finance expertise, for people with facilities expertise, so that we can make better appointments, but to save another layer of politics.
All right, thank you all very much for that. Moving on now to I guess what we would describe as public safety as a whole, and we'll begin with Mr. Cuervo on this. We hear from time to time from Chief Hugh Clements, Providence Police, in tandem, of course, with hard data that relative to other cities, Providence is not a particularly dangerous place to live, work, or entertain oneself. However, public perception of safety issues in Providence is undoubtedly irreflective of those facts, and there certainly are significant public safety issues in the city. This is a multi-part question. As mayor, how aggressive would you be from a law enforcement perspective in addressing crime? Are you in favor of defunding, maintaining funding, increasing funding, or altogether abolishing the police? And how would you serve as a partner to Chief Clements and his department in maintaining public safety? This is a 2-minute response, please.
Everywhere I go in the city and I speak with neighbors and residents and business owners, they tell me that they want effective, accountable policing. And, you know, for the last couple of years, we saw an increase in crime that coincided with a lot of social upheaval and with a big dip in the numbers of police personnel. That's a management problem. That's not a perception problem. That's a management problem. The city of Providence dropped the ball and allowed the number of police officers to drop precipitously. Now we're coming back. There are 430 or so police officers. There's another academy coming on board. I think it's important that everybody in the city of Providence feels safe. But we also have to understand The city of Providence this year is spending $100 million, 20% effectively, 20% of its budget on policing. And I think what we need to be doing is making sure that our police resources are being utilized in the best possible way to offer effective, accountable policing, that we're looking at diversionary programs so that we don't need to be sending police officers with a gun to every single incident. And we also have to look at how we're managing personnel. You know, there are approximately 80 to 90 police officers that are on the street in the uniform division out of 430. And you know, how are we allocating those resources? How are we making sure that we are giving proper coverage and that crimes are actually being solved? And ultimately, I am in favor of ensuring that the people of Providence are safe and that we are utilizing our resources and our police staff and the leadership of this police to provide effective, accountable policing every single day.
Mr. Smiley, on that notion of public safety, you know, how would you serve as a partner to law enforcement? And are you in favor of defunding, maintaining funding, increasing funding, or altogether abolishing the police?
Yeah, you started the question about the perception versus the statistics, and that's the thing. There's no amount of statistics that can convince a business owner or a resident that they're safe. Public safety is very much a feeling, and many people in Providence don't feel safe right now. And we need to change that perception. We need to change that sense of safety. We want people enjoying Providence, its incredible nightlife, our fabulous restaurants. We want people coming to Providence to enjoy the theater and other things. And so that reputation is a problem. I do think it starts with better policing, getting back to real community policing. The last time the chief was asked about this, he said he needed about 450 officers he thought to effectively police the city. We're not quite there at the moment. And so I don't intend to make a staffing decision unilaterally. I plan on working with the chief of police to determine what that right number is. And so in that respect, I think we probably need more police. And so the thing is that to have real community policing and better policing, I do think we're going to need more staffing, because that means having officers permanently assigned or for a long period of time assigned to a geographic district so that neighbors can actually get to know their neighborhood police officers, so that they can rebuild relationships and rebuild trust with the community, and get out of their cruisers, the restoration of the walking beat, starting to see officers on bicycles once again, the things that we've done once before, frankly, but had to cut back from when staffing levels fell. And just as important as rebuilding the relationship between the community and the police is rebuilding the relationship between the police and the administration, because we know that that's been strained in recent years as well. And so I look forward to working closely with our public safety personnel to properly, effectively, and appropriately police our city to restore that sense of safety.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smiley. Ms. LaFortune.
Right. So I lost my partner over 17 years ago to gun violence, and I've been doing work to advocate, to also pass legislation with organizations like the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence, which endorsed me, Moms Demand, grassroots organizations, to ensure that our communities are safer and also safer gun legislation is passed. We need a community policing model where you do have police officers who are on the streets, walking the beats, engaging with the community, that we have true partnerships with our community centers, and also a way to respond to nonviolent incidents. I led the effort to create our city's first behavioral health crisis response initiative so that people are not being criminalized for being homeless or experiencing a mental or behavioral health crisis, which we also need to address because that could lead to crime. For many years, we've seen our community centers fall apart. I mean, look at the Elmwood Community Center. I led the effort to create the task force so that we can allocate funding around the American Rescue Plan Act. And now that community center, where both of my opponents, the opponents here who are in leadership, didn't make any investments in them. So community policing requires partnerships, requires police officers who reflect the communities that they're serving, but also we're making investments in our neighborhoods to address the root causes of these violence incidents. And we're also making sure that we're connecting people who are experiencing a nonviolent crisis to services for continued care. And as mayor, I will continue that effort.
All right, thank you very much. Very briefly here, just going around 15 seconds or so, beginning with Mr. Cuervo. The ATVs, the dirt bikes, the other gasoline-powered off-road vehicles on city streets, how do you manage it?
This is not a Providence-based problem. This is a problem that cities across the country are facing. We have examples nearby. We have examples, the city of Cranston, the city of Central Falls has shut down this problem. The ATV and dirt bike riders don't go there because they have their vehicles impounded and they get a $500 fine, and they're in a world of hurt. They just avoid that. This is about leadership. This is about political leadership. We got into this situation because we took a hands-off approach at the beginning and it spiraled out of hand. And this can be reversed. It's about leadership.
Mr. Smiley?
Yeah, well over a year ago, at the early days of my campaign, I had a press conference calling on the mayor to support the police to be able to properly police the ATV problem and to accept the help that was being offered from the state police. These riders, many of them don't live in Providence. They come from other places nearby, and they come to Providence because there's a reputation that they can get away with it in Providence. So I do think that we need an entirely new message coming from City Hall, and I also think that we should take resources that are being offered, including the state police, who have training in vehicular crime and who have the jurisdiction to follow these riders when they come from elsewhere and when they leave back to elsewhere.
Ms. LaFortune.
This is not just a Providence issue. I live off of North Main Street, and I have heard on many occasions these ATVs driving through Providence, going into Pawtucket, going back. We do need to enforce, making sure that we get them off the streets. I actually held one of the first community meetings with some of my other council colleagues to talk about the ATV issues, and also brought on public safety. But we do need to work with our other cities, our neighboring cities like Pawtucket as well as Cranston, to work with the police department to enforce policies so that we can get them off the roads. They're not meant to be on the road. In fact, I was walking with my daughter. She almost got hit by one. We need to also talk with our state legislators to figure out how we can create space for them so they can ride the ATVs for recreational purposes in an off-road community. Other municipalities and states throughout the nation have done that. So that's something that I would also like to look into, but we need to get them off our streets.
Very quickly, would such a facility be in Providence in your mind?
I don't think we have an area in Providence that we can use for that type of facility. It might have to be in a more rural area.
Facility in Providence?
A facility will solve a fraction of the problem. Most of these individuals are dying to be seen. They're trying to be Instagram stars, and they are driven by the desire to create mischief. They're not just riding down the streets. They're riding on sidewalks. They're riding in the wrong direction. I live on Mount Pleasant Avenue, and every summer I have an endless parade of these individuals going the wrong way, going on the sidewalk. A facility is not the answer. A facility would be fantastic. It solves a fraction of the problem.
Facility in Providence?
I think it's unlikely. I'm happy to have the conversation with some of the riders, and I'm not trying to arrest or imprison anybody for this behavior. I just don't want it to continue to jeopardize the lives of the riders and of everyone else in Providence.
All right, thank you. This is the Providence mayoral Democratic primary debate here on WPRO and the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm Bill Bartholomew. We're joined by Gonzalo Cuervo, Nirva LaFortune, and Brett Smiley. And sticking with you, Mr. Smiley, let's talk infrastructure. In this section, we're looking for 60-second answers. As part of the Great Streets Initiative, Providence has seen the installation of new bike lanes in various parts of the city. Though there is ample support for the lanes, there are also businesses that have complained that these infrastructure installations have negative impacts on their business. Are you in favor of the Great Streets Initiative, or would you prefer a scaled-back version of this, or would you like to see something even more expansive? 60 seconds.
Well, the Great Streets Initiative has a lot more than just bike lanes in it. And so the focus on pedestrian safety and on making sure that our roads meet the needs of everyone that's using them is really important. And the pedestrian safety piece is of critical importance to me. That said, real cities have bike lanes. And there's no reason we can't have them in Providence as well. Where the problem has continued to occur is with the way in which we roll them out and the way in which we communicate to businesses and residents about them. There was inadequate communication on the South Water Street proposal, and I've been talking to business owners on Hope Street lately about the next proposed bike lane, and they feel like, once again, that they were blindsided, and they're concerned that any feedback they might give is going to be ignored because there's actually a predetermined outcome. And so, as mayor, I do think that there's space for bike lanes in Providence. Providence, but I will take community input, business input, and neighborhood input into account before any permanent changes are made.
Ms. LaFortune, the Great Streets Initiative as a whole, and specifically the balance of the bike lanes with the businesses that are complaining.
Right. So the Great Street Initiative is a comprehensive plan to make our streets safer, to create a multimodal and accessible streets. That means having bike lanes. Not everyone owns a car. Everyone in Providence doesn't necessarily take the bus. So we need to provide options for everyone, whether they're riding their bike, taking the bus, driving their cars. I do think there was a lack of communication in terms of the South Water Street project. However, for Hope Street, I'm the city council person. We have been meeting with the community for almost a year now. We've communicated the information. The businesses have been part of the discussions. We actually have started canvassing, knocking on doors, speaking to businesses individually. Listen, this is change, and sometimes it's difficult for people to accept change, but if we want to create an inclusive and accessible city, we also need to make sure that people can get around, whether they're on their bike, in their car, or walking, or in a wheelchair.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Cuervo, the Great Streets Initiative, and specifically with bike lanes.
The Great Streets Initiative, as has been stated already, is important and fantastic move forward in terms of multimodal transportation and mobility for people. This isn't a groundbreaking exercise. This is something that's happening in cities of all sizes across the globe and the country. The challenge that we've had here, as has been stated in the past, is that the city has not been particularly great at communicating to stakeholders ahead of time. And part of that is because the city is not particularly great at that, and part of it is because people have been checked out due to a plethora of issues that we're facing, and also because sometimes people don't pay attention to things until the last minute. We can do a better job of communicating with people. The bike lanes in particular are fantastic. The issues that we've heard on Hope Street, we've also heard on Broad Street with the brand new restriping, which is fabulous. But they've lost 40% of on-street parking in front of small businesses, and the small business owners are very upset. And I think we can work together with them to find solutions that satisfy everybody.
All right, thank you very much. Again, with a 60-second response, beginning with Ms. LaFortune. Public transit in Rhode Island is not utilized by most people, but it is used by some of the city of Providence's most vulnerable and low-income folks, as well as others who see the upside of taking the bus from a logistics, monetary, or ecological standpoint. Let's talk about the Dorrance Street Bus Plaza. If completed, how do you seek to improve public transit as a whole, and are you in favor of the sort of reimagined version of where the bus hub would be in downtown Providence?
Right. So I'm a bus rider. My children are bus riders, and I do think that if we're going to have a bus hub, it should be favorable to the riders. It should increase ridership. It should make resources to ride the bus available and accessible, and it should be in a safe area. So I am support of a new bus hub that's more accessible, that's going to increase ridership, where we're also going to have more environmentally friendly buses that are going there. And in terms of like Kennedy Plaza, this is an opportunity to reimagine Kennedy Plaza to create a more green and open space. But again, whatever decisions we make regarding public transit, which has to be accessible, we need to make sure that we include the voices of people most impacted, and that is the riders.
Mr. Cuervo?
I agree with the councilwoman. There are two schools of thought. There's one school of thought that understands that we need to make sure that our transit riders, the people who are actually using the system, are being benefited by whatever changes are being proposed. And that these changes will not only benefit them, but will make the system more attractive so that more people are compelled to use the bus system. Because right now, we tend to have a car-centric mentality that believes that public transportation in Rhode Island is for people that, for whatever reason, can't afford to own their own car. We need to change that reality. The other thing we need to do is make sure that if it's moved to that new location, that we're programming Kennedy Plaza and maintaining it appropriately so that it becomes an attractive element for the city and not just another abandoned public space.
Mr. Smiley?
Yeah. Making sure that RIPTA works for everybody, and particularly city residents, is a priority, which is why after several iterations, the Dorrance Street proposal maintains a central hub that, according to RIPTA, won't add additional transfers or need to switch buses one more time to preserve that convenience. But at the same note, has important enhancements, facilities, restrooms, and other amenities for riders, but also for our drivers who are also lacking facilities and amenities. And so I do think it's a good proposal. I support it. I'm also excited by what I've heard is that it might be much more than just a bus hub. There are plans, or there's been discussion around additional affordable housing on that location and making it a real enhancement and adding more to the city than currently, at Kennedy Plaza now, it's just the hub. I think it's a move in the right direction. I'm also, more broadly speaking, excited about the R line being free for residents. I hope that does increase ridership. And I think we should look at making the DTC, the Downtown Transit Corridor, also fare free.
All right, thank you all very much. This next question, we're looking for a 2-minute response as we move along here. We're like 3/4 of the way through this debate, it seems. So, housing in Providence, like much of Rhode Island and the nation as a whole, is undeniably in crisis. As mayor, how would you seek to remedy the city's housing crisis? And we begin with Ms. LaFortune.
So this is a complex issue, but housing should be a human right, and everyone should have access to affordable housing across all income spectrums. So there are a couple approaches. One, I am a co-sponsor of the Housing Trust Fund. That's a tool that we can use. I did introduce legislation. I hope to pass that legislation to incentivize developers to build more affordable housing, and it would be based on the average median income household. DARE, for years, has been working on rent stabilization to manage the increase of rent in Providence. We also need to build more housing. So as mayor, some of that American Rescue Plan Act fund, the task force worked with the community, and one of the priorities is housing. And I would like to work with the state to maximize those funds so that we're building more housing, but also looking at zoning policies that have served as barriers and prevented density and also building more affordable housing opportunities. I've been working on the North Main Street Corridor project to create a more multimodal transit corridor. But also, this is an opportunity to develop mixed-use development. And we can look at models that exist already. West Elmwood Housing is a model. It includes inclusionary zoning, where you have these old mills that were turned into housing. Some people are paying full market rate, and some are subsidized. And we can also build more affordable housing in terms of townhouses so that people have access or a pathway to home ownership, which is really important. I mean, when we look at Providence residents, over 70% of our residents are cost burden, which means they're paying over 30% of their income on housing. Housing needs to be affordable from low to moderate income and for people who don't have any type of income at all.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaFortune. Mr. Cuervo, on housing.
Just yesterday, I released my very bold housing plan for the city of Providence, and it covers many different aspects of which we need to address. First of all, it's critical that we build more housing, both affordable housing, market rate housing at every single level. The reason why we haven't done this is because we have this patchwork of agencies and organizations and funding sources that only a handful of experts have the ability to weave together into models that work to develop affordable housing. We need to move to a municipal developer model. We've seen this working in Montgomery County, Maryland, where they issued affordable housing bond around the same time that we did, about a year and a half ago, and they're already underway with a plan to build 8,000 units of affordable and market rate housing for Montgomery County. We have the ability to do that here. A year and a half ago, we issued an affordable housing trust. We bonded $24 million. Taxpayers paid for those $24 million. And it sat there until earlier this year. The city decided that they were going to give 10 of those $24 million to the Superman developers for some gap funding in that project. We have the opportunity to revamp our zoning laws, to upzone, to make it possible and easier for entities to build. And we also have to look at rent stabilization. DARE has been working for a long time on this. Representative Morales and other folks in the legislature have introduced legislation. We need to move this, the details of which will be hashed out between myself as mayor and the city council. But the reality is we need to move forward on this because rent has grown at unsustainable rates that beat inflation, beat the cost of living, and beat any other type of excuse.
quickly, a number for a cap on rent increases off the top of your head.
My proposal begins with a 4% cap because we know that cost of living has increased significantly, but most people's earnings have not increased at more than 3% a year. And that's what we have to do. If we're raising the rent at a rate that's much higher than people's ability to grow their income, then we're not accomplishing anything.
Ms. LaFortune, a number for a rent, if you agree, a rent increase cap.
So part of my plan is to bring stakeholders to the table because we don't want to come up with some arbitrary number. We need to make sure that the number makes sense and it's truly going to stabilize the rent increase. So what I would do, the first thing that I would do as mayor is to bring some of our stakeholders to the table and people who've been working on affordable housing to come up with a number that makes the most sense.
Thank you very much. You'll have your full 2 minutes on this, but just quickly, if it may be included in there, but a rent increase cap off the top of your head, if there's one.
I don't support a rental increase cap. I think that rent control in other cities has been a failure, and I'm concerned that there are winners and losers. I'm concerned that there's strong evidence in other places where this has been tried that landlords stop investing in their buildings, and it does nothing to control the costs for property owners as their taxes and mortgage rates and everything, utility costs, everything else continues to rise. In Providence, many property owners who rent apartments are local neighbors, people who've inherited family homes, people who live in a 3-family and rent the other 2 units out. I don't think it's a good proposal.
Generally on housing, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so it does start with building more housing, and we need housing at every price point for both renters and home ownership opportunities. In recent years, it seems like the only thing getting built in Providence are studio apartments for tenants whose parents are paying the rent because they're here as college kids. And it is displacing long-term families, and it's impossible to find an apartment that's affordable, particularly a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment to raise a family in. And so I think we need to take a hard look at no longer subsidizing anything that is a studio or a student housing project. And I think that the city needs to be encouraging the development of apartments and homes that families can actually live in. At the same note, we need to revisit the programs that we have to support those in subsidized housing. There's a growing middle that's missing right now, where we have people who are working and they make too much money to qualify for subsidized housing, but not enough money to actually pay the rent. And so I intend to work with the legislature and Rhode Island Housing on funding proposals for those who, it's been referred to as workforce housing or others, where you have a family of 4, maybe one parent's a school teacher and another one's a CNA, and their household income is $60,000, $70,000 a year. They don't qualify for the subsidized housing, but they can't afford an apartment in Providence right now. And that group of people is growing and needs to be assisted with a lesser subsidy, but a subsidy nonetheless in order to make ends meet.
All right, thank you very much. Very quickly, Mr. Smiley says that such a cap will have a negative impact on the property owners themselves. Your response to property owners who may say the same thing?
There are different models that present different outcomes across the country. And the reality is, look, I'm a local landlord, a homeowner. I have apartments. And I will tell you this, what we've seen time and time again is rental increases that are far outrunning the increase in the cost of maintenance of properties and the cost of taxes. Many people are conscious landlords, and other people are price gouging to the extent that the market will allow. And we've seen neighborhoods like South Providence, where places where 2 years ago you could rent a 2-bedroom apartment for $900, they're renting for $1,600. That is unacceptable, and that is unsustainable for our families and our individuals. Same
question to you, Ms. LaFortune.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to every policy, but it's about bringing the people to the table and making the best decision. And there are models that work, that have worked in other places. I mean, we've been losing our middle income folks for quite some time. They're moving to other places. They're moving to Barrington because the schools are better, or they can't afford to live here. Just recently, one of our local journalists, posted about not being able to afford rent in their apartment. It's quite problematic. So we need to take a multifaceted approach to address our housing crisis, which includes building more housing, ensuring that we have a control on the rise of rent, but also creating pathways for people to own their own homes as well.
Thank you, Ms. LaFortune. 15 seconds wrapping this topic up, Mr. Smiley.
I look forward to aggressively expanding low and moderate income housing opportunities in Providence, but doing it in a way that doesn't have unintended consequences.
All right, thank you all very much. Moving on to our last topic that is not included in the lightning round. We're looking for a 60-second answer here, beginning with Mr. Cuervo. There are tangible negative health care outcomes for city residents who live near the Port of Providence. As mayor, how would you address the pollutants that are emitted from the Port of Providence? 60 seconds.
We need to create opportunities to transition some of those businesses that are there away from polluting enterprises. You know, I raised my kids in Washington Park in that neighborhood. I lived in that neighborhood for 17 years, and I'm very aware of that situation. We have some of the highest asthma rates in the country, not just in Rhode Island, in the country over there, and it's really unacceptable. And there's an opportunity, you know, recently as October of last year, there was a company that was grinding used cement 300 feet away from the health center on Allens Avenue. That's unacceptable. We need to move towards different zoning and different opportunities and opportunities to develop a green and blue economy in that area that's going to create sustainable jobs that will help the cities grow its tax base and also put food on the table for more families.
Mr. Smiley.
Yeah, there are some really bad actors down on the Providence waterfront, starting with the former recycler that's got a host of DEM violations. And we've got the crane half submerged in the water. And so those kind of businesses need to be held accountable, and whether through legal action or eminent domain, removed from the waterfront. I would like to see, particularly for the area north of the Thurbers Avenue on-ramp, starting with that one egregious actor, us expand into the wind energy space, which is both an opportunity for clean, environmental-friendly use, but also for job opportunities for Providence residents. You know, they're expanding the wind energy business down at Quonset, the Port of New Bedford. Even though we had the first offshore wind farm in America in Rhode Island, the Port of New Bedford moved faster, and they are now full of wind energy businesses. So I want to see us get back in the game, take advantage of our expertise and our reputation in this space, and create good, environmentally friendly jobs that's also helping secure a clean energy future for Rhode Island on the waterfront.
Thank you very much. And Ms. LaFortune.
There has been bad actors along the Allens Lane corridor for quite some time. I grew up in the Washington Park area. In fact, my brother was born with respiratory health issues and has been suffering for 32 years now. I'm the only candidate here who stood against National Grid when they tried to bring toxin chemicals into the neighborhood, and testified and joined community members in that effort. We passed one of the most comprehensive and strongest environmental legislation a few years ago. We need to enforce. We also need to hold these bad actors accountable, which is enforcement. So as mayor, that's something that I will do, but also looking at other green mitigation, like planting more trees, but more importantly, working with the local community members, because there are people who are doing amazing work, like Linda, who is the head of the Washington Park Neighborhood Association, amongst other environmental justice groups. And we have the climate justice report that the city has right now, and it's part of my plan. And excuse me if I just messed it up a little bit, but that outlines some real environmental justice work that the city should do. And during my first 100 days, I want to measure where we're at. But again, we need to hold these bad actors accountable and make some real environmental investments along the corridor.
All right, thank you all very much. We now move on to the lightning round, which we're looking for very brief, could be a one-word yes or no answer, certainly ideally nothing more than 10 seconds so we can get to as many of them as possible before we go to our closing remarks. And we begin with Mr. Smiley. How would you make Providence a better place to start or run a small business?
I think the simplest and best thing that we can do is put all of our city services, city forms, city tax payments online. It's the 21st century. We could at least get into the 20th century. I've heard too many stories about people having to go to City Hall and then being told to go down the street to 444 and then go back to City Hall again. There's no excuse that we can't digitize all the services necessary to pay your bills, start a business, get a permit, etc.
Ms. LaFortune, how would you make it better for small businesses in Providence?
Part of my plan is to have within the Economic Development Office to have a small business entity with a small business liaison that's working with our small businesses. That could also work with our neighborhood associations to support our small businesses. We have one of the highest commercial tax rates in the city. It makes it in the state, in the country, pardon, which makes it hard for people to do business here. A lot of information is not accessible. So it's about improving technology, making tools and resources more accessible, but also giving small businesses a resource that they could go to so they're not constantly going around in circles just to address minor issues. And I've seen it over and over again.
Thank you, Mr. Cuervo.
I want to decentralize our approach to city-based economic development. I want to create economic opportunity zones in the neighborhoods, partner with our community libraries, rent space from them, and have the experts go to the merchants as opposed to waiting for the merchants to come downtown. We can offer technical support, access to capital, connections to organizations that are currently doing that type of work locally. We're going to go to the small business person. And sometimes the best thing the city can do is just get out of the way using technology and using common sense to help when we need to help and get out of the way when we're not being helpful.
All right, thank you very much. Looking for a yes or no answer here, beginning with Mr. Smiley. Are you in favor of school resource officers?
Yes, with reforms.
No, we need to increase more social and emotional support for our kids.
Mr. Cuervo?
No.
Can Providence become a sustained national or even global arts mecca, and how would you implement it? Looking again for a very short answer to that. I know we could probably do a whole forum on that question, beginning with Mr. Smiley.
We've done several.
We have done several forums. I think we can. We need to support our local artists, not just the big institutions like Trinity and PPAC, but the neighborhood-based artists, the community-based artists. The city should be supporting them by paying our artists, looking at our major events like PVD Fest and others as opportunities to showcase the talent that's here. Housing is a big part of the puzzle for working artists in Providence, and so we can't afford to ignore the affordable housing challenges and the other space that is where the magic happens in Providence.
Ms. LaFortune.
Right. Absolutely. We have some talented artists who live in the city of Providence or who live in our state. And I do think that it could be an economic driver, and it should be part of our economic infrastructure as well. I agree that housing is a major issue. AS220 has a model that we could implement throughout the city of Providence. We should also look at working with the artists, larger artist art entities, as well as small art entities to expand opportunities. And also studio space. We can create mixed-use development and have studio space on the bottom and artists live on top. But we definitely should invest more in our artists to really create a strong artist economic infrastructure.
Mr. Cuervo.
Providence has one of the most unique and eclectic combinations of cultures and art creators in the country, at least in the Northeast. And we overlook this. And what we're trying to do is we're always trying to recreate models that have worked in other cities as opposed to kind of looking inside and seeing the amazing things that we have. Not only cultural diversity, but also artistic diversity, musical talent, people that are world-class musicians, world-class creators, visual artists, plastic artists. We need to leverage those assets, celebrate them, and make them an attraction point for our city regionally and nationally.
All right. So staying with you, Mr. Cuervo, how would you grade Mayor Elorza's 2 terms as mayor, a letter grade?
I don't like to grade politicians because running the city of Providence or any city is like trying to fix a plane while it's in flight. You know, I think there are some things that the current administration has done very well, and there are some things that they have not done well at all. And I think what we need to be worrying about is what are we going to do to move the city forward and make it sustainable and close that opportunity gap that is leaving so many people behind, not just working families, but also art creators and a number of other people who can no longer afford to live in our city and who are being displaced.
Ms. LaFortune, grade for Mr. Mayor Elorza.
Well, I'm the only elected official on this table, and watching the mayor and working with the mayor, it is very difficult to run a city like Providence. It's hard work, and There are times that you do things that are amazing, and sometimes you just don't get it right. But it's, as mayor, one of the things that I want to make sure that I do is I bring the voices of the community, the voices of Providence, to City Hall, and approach being a leader in an inclusive manner, where I hire the best and the brightest talent, target people from the city of Providence who also have lived experience, but also bring people to the table to help us with the decision-making process.
We're going to get a letter grade out of you, Mr. Smiley.
I'm afraid not, but I do think that the mayor should be. We should acknowledge and appreciate that we've had 8 years of ethical leadership and honest government in Providence. I also think that the city's run balanced budgets for a long time. He inherited a structural deficit left over from the last Great Recession, which has been paid off. We have a rainy day fund, so there's plenty of good, but I don't grade other politicians.
Okay, we are rapidly approaching our closing remarks here. I'll ask a few more of these lightning round questions. This is a yes or no question that uses a buzz term, but I think I'll expand on it. Beginning with you, Ms. LaFortune, would you maintain Providence's sanctuary city status, officially, or I guess just in general, as a welcoming place for people who are not born in the United States?
Bill, I'm a formerly undocumented person, and my family escaped a dictatorship. Providence was a safe haven for them, and continues to be for many immigrant families. So establishing and making sure that our city, whether you use the term sanctuary or inclusive, this city should be inclusive to all people, and also connect folks to organizations to help them get on the pathway to citizenship, very similar to my own personal journey.
Mr. Smiley?
Yeah, I would maintain the same policies that we have today and continue to be a city that is welcoming and embracing of people from across the globe, regardless of status.
And Mr. Cuervo?
Absolutely.
Last question here in the lightning round. Does Rhode Island's local media serve as an accurate mirror for what is happening in and is important to Providence's communities? Beginning with you, Mr. Smiley. Does the media represent the city of Providence well to the rest of the state?
I think we're struggling with the same challenges with perception. You asked about crime earlier on. I think that's a perfect example, which is where the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. I think we hear a lot about some of the bad news in Providence, and I wish that we were better promoting. I think the alternative press and people who were maybe not the mainstream media does a better job of promoting what's special about this place, but I also think that the mayor has a role to play, and as mayor, I intend to be the greatest cheerleader and champion for Providence to help counteract what is sometimes an overly negative narrative about Providence, so that people can appreciate and enjoy what is so special about this place, and at least why I love it.
Ms. LaFortune?
I do think that there's been some good media coverage around some of the amazing work that's happening throughout the city of Providence in communities that historically have been forgotten. But I do think there's more work that needs to be done. I also think that representation matter. We need to increase the number of people of color in the media sector. I went to Temple University for undergrad. My undergraduate degree is in communications. But, a lot of people are not pursuing those opportunities because of the pay and the affordability issue. So housing continues to be an issue to attract talented people from diverse backgrounds to our city, to our state. But, they are making efforts, but I would like to see more representation so we could accurately represent all the communities, but also highlight the narratives of so many people and the wonderful work and the culture throughout the city of Providence.
And Mr. Cuervo?
There are 190,000 amazing stories in Providence. We can't expect any media outlet to tell them, particularly when media outlets themselves are in survival mode. And as Brett said, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the reality of the media landscape. The mayor has an unbelievable and unparalleled bully pulpit, the soft power of that office to shape narratives, to tell stories, to really celebrate what's amazing. What we've seen for the last couple of years, I'd say almost decades, is this approach, this technocratic approach to leadership that says, here's the data, here's the 5 things that are wrong, and here are my 5 ways we're going to fix it. And that's important. But we're missing the other part where we say, these are the amazing things that are happening in the city. These are the amazing assets that we have that we're celebrating and that make us a world-class, unique, eclectic, fantastic city. And I will fight for that day and night. And I have a history in the arts and culture scene. I love music. I love all these things. I live it. I don't just love it. I live it. I go to shows. I participate. And I look forward as mayor to really celebrating that reality and making everybody, not just Providence people, everybody in the state, proud of their capital city, the city where Providence was born and the city that continues to be the heartbeat of Rhode Island.
All right, so we have reached the point for our closing statements. Thank you all very much for a very productive and informative debate here. We begin with Nirva LaFortune. 60 seconds, please.
All right. Thank you, Bill, for giving me this opportunity. So one of the things I really enjoy doing is running, and I have ran through every single neighborhood in the city of Providence. And when you get to run and see the city from the ground up, you see the beauty of the city, but you also see the challenges. As mayor, I'm going to prioritize some of the key things that impact our families, our communities. That includes providing every child with a quality education, ensuring that our communities are safe, ensuring that government works for every single person. It's honest, it's open, it's ethical. We're delivering basic city services. We're making sure that our city is accessible and affordable. I've been doing the work. In my 5 years on city council, I have been working towards creating a more affordable city. I have been working towards creating better educational opportunities. I have been a strong advocate in ensuring that our city is environmentally just for all. So I will continue to do the work as mayor, and we need a leader who's not just going to talk the talk, but is going to do the work and who gets it. And I am confident that I am that leader who will do so.
Thank you, Ms. LaFortune. Brett Smiley, your closing remarks.
Yeah, one of the things we didn't talk about today was the impact of the nonprofits in Providence. Over 40% of the land in Providence is tax exempt. 60% of the people are paying 100% of the bills, and it's not sustainable. 20 years ago, the mayor at the time, Cicilline, negotiated with Brown for the first payments in lieu of taxes. Those are coming up this year. The next mayor will renegotiate those. Similarly, a decade ago, Mayor Taveras negotiated with the unions for the suspension of certain pension costs. That kicks back in next year. And last year, we received over $140 million of one-time federal funds, which is also going to be gone soon. These things could create a crisis, but I think could be an opportunity if we have a leader who knows how to be ready to lead. I'm so proud to have been the governor's chief of staff under Governor Raimondo's administration, the state's director of administration during the worst days of the pandemic. I'm the only candidate running this year who's ever managed personnel or budgets at this scale. I'm confident that I can be the leader to meet the moment. I'm asking for your vote in the September 13th primary. I encourage everyone to learn more at smileyformayor.com, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And our final closing remarks, 60 seconds from Gonzalo Cuervo.
We've heard a lot about experience, and, we've heard from a council member who's been effecting change for 5 years, and we're still facing many of the same challenges we've been facing for a long time. And we've heard from a person who has a very diverse management experience, who spent 17 months in the city and cost the city millions of dollars in a settlement with the firefighters after the platoon debacle. And we all understand one thing. Everybody who's running for mayor loves this city. But the reality is that I am the candidate who's running for mayor who has more than a decade of experience in the city administration, experience as Deputy Secretary of State, getting legislation passed at the State House through the legislative process, and a lifetime of community-based experience. I started out as a community advocate and organizer. I was a small business owner on the South Side, and I've been a leader and advocate for the nonprofit and arts community my entire life. I'm the one who has the detailed, bold plans. You can find those on gonzaloforprovidence.com. The citywide coalition of support to win and govern effectively, and the proven leadership experience.
All right. Thank you all very much. Gonzalo Cuervo, Nirva LaFortune, Brett Smiley, the three candidates in the Democratic primary for mayor of Providence. And thank you to all the listeners for joining us today. We will be back with more of our debate series coming up with the Congressional District 2 Democratic primary later on. That'll actually be on September 1st. You can find all of our debates at 997WPRO.com on our Election Central tab or RIPodcast.com or wherever you get the Bartholomew Town podcast. For all of us here at WPRO, I'm Bill Bartholomew. Have a great afternoon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.